Hey everybody, this is Dr. Maples. Welcome back to 5 Minute Sociology. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite ideas, and that is the Thomas Theorem. I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know about the Thomas Theorem, and I'll even give you some cool examples that you can use in your assignments. This idea is almost 100 years old, but sociologists still believe even today that this is important, and I'll tell you why at the end of the video. We got a lot to do today, so what do you say we get started? So the Thomas Theorem is created in 1928 by William Isaac Thomas and Dorothy Swaine Thomas, and it simply reads, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. They actually meant persons here. They were including everyone in society, and this idea actually has a little bit of discrimination attached to it that we'll talk about on the next slide. But if we want to boil this theorem down to a basic idea, we can really say if we believe something is real, then we react accordingly. If we feel like we see a stop sign, what do? We stop. So in 1928, W.I. Thomas and Dorothy Swaine Thomas released a book called The Child in America, and this book examines social order and anatomy in the United States. And mere pages from the end of the book, they drop that famous phrase, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. They also attach it to an extraordinary example. That example involves a person who's experiencing a mental illness, and they've been put in prison for basically being violent towards other people. The explanation here is that the mental illness causes this person to believe that other people are saying absolutely horrendous things about them. And when they see people on the street talking to themselves, they feel that the person is actually talking about them, so they are at risk of hurting that person. If we define situations as real, they're real in their consequences. If we think people are talking smack about us, we react accordingly. Now, this idea just sits there in the book. They don't really do anything with it. It's not until 1942 when Robert Merton, who will be a future 5 Minute Sociology video I'll make just for you, ends up saying, no, we need to be talking about this idea. This idea has been overlooked and it's super important. In fact, he even gives the phrase its famous name, the Thomas Theorem. I'll also talk in a future video a little bit more about the history of why he chose that name, because it's not a theorem, it's not even a theory, it's actually a phrase. There's also a problem that develops here because of the way Merton handles this. He basically gives W.I. Thomas the credit for this, and this is where we see Dorothy Swaine Thomas suddenly fall away from the Thomas Theorem. In fact, maybe in our first example of the Thomas Theorem, we can talk about discrimination. So let's do some easy examples of the Thomas Theorem. Now let's start with gender discrimination. Let's pretend that you grow up in a household with very rigid beliefs about gender and housework. In this case, gender A does all of the housework in the home. What's the consequences of that? Well, as an adult, you're probably going to carry forward many of those ideas about gender norms. First off, that gender norms are real, that gender and housework expectations are legitimate, and moreover, your ideas about gender may overflow into all sorts of other places, even your ideas about who should and should not be doing certain activities. If we define situations as real, they're real in their consequences. How about laws? If we agree as a society that laws are real and that there's a consequence to not following laws, it's amazing how we all more or less follow the rules. If we define laws as real and we understand there's a consequence of breaking them, then we shouldn't be surprised that, lo and behold, most people will follow those laws. Now, if it gets to a situation where maybe those laws aren't being reinforced, such as, lots of car robberies happening in a particular city and no one's doing anything about it, we don't necessarily feel those laws are legitimate anymore, and people stop following them. So there again, we see the Thomas Theorem. If we define situations as real, it's real in its consequences. So why are we still talking about the Thomas Theorem today? I'll let Robert Merton say it, because he said it best. He said the Thomas Theorem is probably the single most consequential sentence ever put in print by an American sociologist. And you know what? I agree. I think the Thomas Theorem is effective because it is devastatingly simple. It lets us understand how, as individuals, our actions are shaped by the things happening around us and the things that we believe are real. If we define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. On top of that, we can see how the core elements of the Thomas Theorem really link back to the early days of social constructionism. It gives us a theoretical perspective for truly appreciating how we construct our reality. All right, that's all for 5 Minute Sociology today. If there's a topic I can cover for you in the future, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Hope I'm not over time. I probably am.